So now I'll read some introductions for our readers in the order that they're going to be reading. I'm particularly excited to hear Nduka Otiono's reading because, as Peter Midgley points out in the introduction to this new selected collection, DisPlace, Nduka's work is kind of within and I guess building out of an oral tradition, but still these new poems, the new poems particularly in this collection, they kind of invite readers in to look and listen. For example, from the first poem in the collection, Today Time is the eyeglass I wear, Nduka writes, "Look, you will find the window to hidden treasures." And in the second poem, My lips bear witness to the blood that irrigates my heart, he writes, "Listen, you will hear the interdental lisps of a poet in limbo, incubating new dreams, flirting with an angry tongue threatening to burst." I love those lines. His proper bio is Nduka Otiono is a writer, associate professor and graduate program coordinator of the Institute of African Studies at Carleton University. He is the author and co-editor of 9 books of creative writing and academic research. Prior to turning to academia, he was a journalist for 15 years in Nigeria and served as the general secretary of the Association of Nigerian Authors. DisPlace is his latest book, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. After Nduka, we'll hear from Sanna Wani, who writes about grief and the sun as if they are like a dichotomy, as if they're two sides of a coin, but also one and the same. There's this lightness to all emotion, but also grief inherent in almost all human experiences. From the poem Princess Mononoke, Sanna writes, "Mother, I hate the smell of my skin. I hate the way it stretches toward each light. There is something inside of me that says, live, so I must. There is something inside of me that says, try, and I cannot stop." Her proper bio says, Sanna Wani lives by the Mississini River. My Grief, the Sun is her first collection of poetry, and she loves daisies. And finally, our final reader will be Aaron Kreuter. And if you've ever found yourself watching some random television show and not knowing why, then Shifting Baseline Syndrome is for you. The poems in this collection, I think, really shine when the scope is kind of drawn back to look at the human folly, I guess, more generally. Then behind every humorous line, there's like this true dread or grief for a world on the verge of collapse, as in the poem, Get Away From Me, Television, where Kreuter writes, "Television is just another name for Anthropocene. You get home and turn on the news, because why not ruin a perfectly shitty day?" His proper bio says, Aaron Kreuter is the author of the short story collection You and Me Belonging, and the poetry collection Arguments for Lawn Chairs. Kreuter lives in Toronto and is a postdoctoral fellow at Carleton University, and Shifting Baseline Syndrome is his second book of poems. That's all from me. I'm going to hand it over to Nduka.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for that generous introduction. It's usually very exciting to hear one being introduced, rather than having to do it yourself. And thanks, I loved listening to the highlights that you drew, and also the poems that you called attention to, the opening poems of this collection. So now that you have started the ritual, for me, I begin with an invocation, which you have already helped me with. I'm going to tonight take you through different spaces. And I'm going to begin in some of a reverse order. Like some of you might know, there's that very uncomfortable expression, that says, where are you originally from? So, and I don't shy away from answering it. So I would say, I'd like to declare my Nigerian ancestry, which also reflects in my poetry, but I am like the two arms of a river. And I also have the other river that flows into the mainstream, which is my Canadian river. And tonight, I'm just gonna take you a bit through these rivers. So I begin from Edmonton. So I arrived in Edmonton in 2006. And despite the fact that I had traveled relatively widely, I didn't quite understand that being a journalist and visiting a place was different from living in a place. And I'm sure some of you have had that kind of experience where you feel that, oh, I know this place. And then, but you're a tourist. And the life and the sights and the scenes and the sounds that a tourist experiences is different in many cases from that of somebody living there for a while. And so I thought I had seen a bit of winter and I'd seen a bit of, well, it was my first time in Canada. I've been to the States and so on. So that first, I arrived in the winter, no, the fall of 2006. And despite the fact that it was fall, it was very cold for my tropical skin. However, I soon began to enjoy the company that I kept in Edmonton, and I really loved Edmonton. And I was so happy to be back there at the invitation of my alma mater, the University of Alberta, and the Department of English and Film Studies. So this is one of those poems I wrote one of those evenings that looks like Ottawa today and Ottawa in this season. With the weather being a bit mild today, and there's some bits of the rain still visible on the ground. And so I went to this room. It's a pub actually at the University of Alberta that turned out to be a favorite destination for me after classes. And the title of this poem is Paint the Sky. It's one of my Edmonton poems. It's a wet, breezy Friday night, and I will paint the sky tonight, inspired by my raincoat jacket, a raincoat that reminds me of the gossamer feel of condoms. I am in an Edmonton bar alone, dreaming of homeland and Maxim with all the stars, pepper soup, and light bar salad that Friday nights offer. Inside rat, there are no rats. The bar is clean like a newly shaved skin, but instead of the fragrance of aftershave, the smell of tobacco hangs and the air suffocating desire with nicotine. And I, a troubadour, am perched on a stool with spindly legs like the stilts of some African masquerade, facing the window. Outside, Edmonton is a tortured splash of incandescent bulbs. From my glassy hotspot, I see angels of darkness in flight with no compass to locate my condo, shadowed somewhere on the horizon, wherein I've grown weary from keeping vigils for a dreaded winter. As each day glides past with expectations of nature's frozen temper, tonight I see red in the air, for red is the freedom road, Oshafison says, and red is rat's star outlined in a hue of blue that reminds me of hurrying cumulus outside. I will paint the sky red tonight when the clouds are spread out like the wings of an eagle in mid-flight. I see floating atop the watery film of my favorite beverage, pictures of Edmonton's rousing skyline, but cannot find, buried somewhere in her valley, her river of peace. At West End, clouds gather like wolves drifting towards this room at the top. Inside the bar, Edmonton is a chatter of tongues converging from distant climes on this dragging Friday night. But between power plant and rat, there are no signs of Joel with Bagger and his advance party, poets on a mission to pour libations to their muse. Now in this suspended bar, lonely, I wander through a maze of temptations beckoning like fresh Irish cream and thinking of special Thanksgiving turkeys and the festivities in the air. For tonight, I shall paint the sky inspired by my raincoat jacket. A raincoat that reminds me of the gossamer feel of condoms. Alone in this Edmonton bar, I dream of homeland and all the guns and crude oil in combat in the Niger Delta. And that's the end of the poem. I'll take you to another place. One of the places I really enjoyed visiting. And that's Berkeley. I find the undulating terrain of Berkeley, California, so enchanting. And then on this trip, I was sure to visit the Poetry Walk. I don't know how many of you have been there. There's this beautiful place, you know, the Poetry Walk, where you have on the street, and then you have words by poets, you know, in patina on the grounds, like you have on Wallet, on the kind of stuff you have on Beverly Boulevard. So this is a memory of Berkeley. And this for Robert Haas, Malcolm Magdalene, and Toby Wolfe. Here, the world meets you through poets in a concert of words on the sidewalk. The words summon you, sacred unction in communion with Mother Earth. Far from California's crazy infernos, on the east shore of San Francisco Bay, a cornucopia of skill-screened words rise to meet you at Addison Street. And poets, step by step, tease time and space with porcelain enamel texts cast on iron plates. Here, a gathering of poets, tile by tile, mingle history and emotions of a shared destiny. Wayfarer, in search of lost words, you have traveled from Boston with traffic on Friday nights, to trace the coalition of the willing. Poets, patrons, architects, technocrats, united in vision of worship of words. Here is a hub of the world, a short whisper away from Free Speech Circle at UCB, where in some gorgeous library, Mark Twain sits, daydreaming of San Francisco's outrage, from city lights to Addison streets, before Silicon Valley emerged from the menacing fog to hoodwink a generation lost on the information superhighway. Still, on Berkeley's Poetry Walk, words are the world's emperor and poets are her royal majesties. Robed in such metaphoric fineries, you will quietly genuflect to their verbal legacies. From the Olong song, see, I am dancing on the rim of the world, I am dancing. Seraphic voices shepherd you through this streetscape, some whispering, like Yosano Akiko, others howling like Allen Ginsberg and his Beat Generation. Together, they resurrect in plates that patina into antique hue, igniting nostalgia for Clark's Ibadan and its running splash of rust and gold. Here, the world meets you. Through poets in a concert of words on a sidewalk, the words become one in John Roberts' emblematic poem, invite you to rediscover the aura of an era. And then I'll move from these poems or places to one of the poems, some of the more elegiac poems that I wrote under the coronavirus, which has claimed so many lives, you know, over 5 million. And that's where the opening lines are from. But I'm going to read one of these poems where, you know, you're just trying to untangle, you know, the thoughts in your mind, some crazy thoughts sometimes when you open the television and you're seeing mass graves, as was the case in New York, in Ecuador, in all of those places. More like the kind of thing that we see these days with the invasion of Ukraine. And then you cringe, you know, like there's a sense of trying to obliterate these images, of not wanting to see them. But at the same time, you're like, you know, so connected to the stories, the sympathy that, you know, you want to share in that humanity. You want to share in the grief. And so it's like a dilemma, you know, should I turn on the TV, shouldn't I? Should I see these images, shouldn't I? And so you have all of these images in the mind. And I wrote this poem, Untangling Cobwebs in the Mind. Over reflections on the spider's craft, in caverns of white light, I appropriate vigil, and memories assault me. I am son of Otiono, the champion wrestler. Meet me at the door of the cavern, and I will show you 7 stars of the universe. I am the sole player in my mind game. And from these mind games, I'm going to read one of those Kreuter poems again. I will skip some of the sadder or some of the more grievous poems in this collection tonight, and just keep it a bit light in terms of the emotions we feel, because one is already so drained with all the bad news that suffocates us. But I'll read this, a chain of requiems, and I extend these requiems for all of those who either due to war or disease, come crashing down, and in some cases are buried on unmarked graves. This is a celebration for all of those departed in times of crisis. A chain of requiems for the multitudes who perished in the time of coronavirus. In this season of the contagion, life is an antiseptic street of hand sanitizers, bereft of handshakes, kisses, or hugs. In this terrorized season of the contagion, life is a chain of requiems. They have vanished without farewells, buried hurriedly amid silent funerals. Kings and subjects in emergency graves. No bellman to toll for these braves who fought, lonely in their corona suffering. Coronavirus corrodes the world with untimely disappearances, dispensing grief like a sadist. In a coven without a brief, as time absconds, life tumbles down, down, down an hourglass of mourning. I think I have just enough time to read one more poem. And I'm going to read some kind of something that fascinates me so much about space again. Remember, the title of my collection is DisPlace. And it's a play on being displaced and then also being placed in a certain location. So my life is being ruled, by just living from one room to the other, living from space to space. And I think pretty much all of us, experience that, whether we are conscious of it or not. So this poem is Rooms We Live In. That's the title. And I take this with an epigraph from Patrick Frerson's poem, Anna. And I like to read that epigraph. We walk from streetlight to streetlight, silence to silence. How to speak about the human heart and memory. How to speak about all the rooms we live in. Rooms we live in. As from silhouettes to nightmares, so from birth to death we live from room to room. Conceived in a room inside woman, we swim in forever warm amniotic waters until nature evicts us, debt us without unpaid boarding and lodging bills out of sight. So, what is man that I'm mindful of him, forever a child searching for teats from mother to wife like a butterfly in flight? We walk from streetlight to streetlight. How do I begin to sing about mother, tireless creditor to errant children, always welcoming all to her room? Only yesterday, I saw her in a dream, rosary in one hand, in the other olive oil to anoint a soil continually traveling in silence, when the road is spread eagled, impatient like grandma's pipe, yearning for tobacco. Inside her room, smoke and ashes become incense, and the air is still, blowing from silence to silence. Some rooms come as rites of passage, classrooms, offices, bars, or one I was given at the adolescence, where I learned to sing songs of experience, the fire of pubescence burning in my loins. Each day was riddled with escapades as I returned from one friend's room with one story or another, after sharing on spent cigarette stubs and remnants in elders' palm wine kegs. How do I remember all the rooms with history? How to speak about the human heart and memory? How do I speak about the eternal lonely room into which I'll retire, unaware of its location or for how long I live there before the last judgment? How do I know what happens among the dead Death makes us all so ridiculous, the poet said. Between casket and grave, which is the last room, there will return sandhouse and bones, uninvited tenants with unpaid boarding and lodging bills. Between womb and tomb, where is peace within? How else to speak about all the rooms we live in? And I think I'll probably just pause now. How am I doing with time? Do I have time to read one more poem? Okay, it looks like I do. And then in that case, I'm just gonna read my last poem for the evening. And this is gonna be some kind of love poem. Or I will read a poem about, let's see. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'll read this love poem. Just give me a moment and I get it. And some of you might be familiar with Arabian Nights, you know, the book that has fantastic stories. It's one of my favorite literary books, 1001 Tales, Nights. I wrote this poem after reading that book and actually writing an essay on that book, Arabian Nights. So you probably have some of the echoes and know that Shahrazad is from there. Love in a time of nightmares. And this is my last poem for now. I no longer sleep, Shahrazad. Since that encounter with you, spiller of yarns, I no longer sleep. Nights unroll with tales and you stroll through the arteries of my heart. You are the naked fires in my dream, burning coal in the harmattan of life. Burn, coal, burn, earth, wind, fire, escort me, feeling the crackling embers of a dying regime whose generals perish in jets, crashes, and others metamorphose into latter-day democrats. I walk with you, Shahrazad, through streets inspired in spirit land, thinking of Okibo and Biafra's dead. I walk through the ruins of dreamland, thinking of demon-crazy politicians lost in a maze of old politics. I no longer sleep, my love, for there are no lamb tails from parliament, only howls, hooting and looting. Oh, Shahrazad, you are the chloroform of my dreams. I smell you in the seams of my pajamas. Beyond the bloodletting in Persia, I sleepwalk in bushes full of terrorists, and night, filled with nightmares, leaves my eyes burnishing like bonfires, rekindling the suns of independence. Shahrazad, my love, after the death you rise and smile, and I'm the gap between your teeth, the empty spaces that seek the dentist's attention. I am your untutored suitor, lost in an age of oil wars, unable to raise the bride price. I am the jobless youth, smoking cannabis in the alleys and thinking of Canaan land. I am your Sunday pastor, preacher man with a passion for tithes. Light my candles, O Shahrazad, keep the spell blazing. For you are the theme of my dreams, and like California wildfires, I drift across passion land, hoping to anchor in your bosom. But here I am, Shahrazad, where love abandoned me. Here I am, prostrate like a tired phallus after a long night. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I guess I'm gonna go now. So I'm Aaron Kreuter. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to Greg and everyone at Octopus Books for hosting, and thanks to Chris and everyone at Arc Poetry for organizing the event. I'm really looking forward to it. This will be the first time I'm reading from my new book, Shifting Baseline Syndrome. And when I was deciding on what to read today, I took out my reader's copy and I noticed that there was that my 3-year-old daughter Noah got some paint splashes on it, some green and red paint. So this is truly a one-of-a-kind item now. And if anybody has their own copy and would like Noah to put some paint on it, just come by, or we can arrange something, and you can also have a one-of-a-kind painted object. So I'm going to read 4 to 5 poems. And we'll just jump right in. So this first poem is called Maps. It's about maps. Maps. How easy to forget that we're here because of maps, that map libraries are dangerous places. Maps can lead you directly to the clear cut, or they can show you how to run the river without leaving a trace. Maps tell us denizens of the 21st a too familiar story. From reckless diversity to white, orange, and gray soft monolith, 17 clicks from the street corner where you almost had your first kiss to the flat, false television screen of the globe. A satellite image of the Great Lakes is to the Great Lakes as the phrase 8 billion people is to 8 billion actual people, if you want to get homologous about it. Maps don't colonize people, assholes colonize people, with the help of maps, of course. Maps are a story we tell ourselves in our most mapless moments. The portage around the rapids is off by 2 millimeters, and therefore you will die. There's a smudge on the screen where there's supposed to be a weapons factory, and whoopsie, there goes a children's hospital. A map's relation to mystery depends entirely on the map maker's commitment to a solid breakfast. Maps lie, or they don't. Just a little insight into one line from the poem where it says 17 clicks from the street corner to the flat false television screen of the globe. That's if you on Google Maps, if you zoom all the way in, just as far in before you're an actual person, then you click zoom out, it's 17 clicks from that tiniest part to the entire globe. So you heard that here first. Sorry. Next up, since the band Fish is actually playing a 4-night sold-out run right now at Madison Square Garden in New York City, I'm going to read this poem and dedicate it to any Fish fans out in the audience. Acid trip in a porta potty. Plastic spaceship, time capsule phone booth, last townhouse in a row bordering a suburb of tents, a downtown of hill and stage, blue walls, sweet cloying disinfectant. The escalator inside you is a thermal vent, is a lake heated to boil, is an eye gone full pupil. Something shifts outside, changing the light, and you're a lone outpost on the moon. You're a coat check girl in her little cubby deep in Mariana's Trench. You're trapped under 2 kilometers of glacial ice. The ice is heavy, calm, aquamarine. There's a knock on the door. It's the ice wanting to get in, wanting to scratch you, mark you, gargle boulder potholes into your skin. From far away, laughter. Something shifts. Time forgets itself. Your vertical tub fills with fossils, skeletons, detritus of a trillion spines, a trillion spins, the sweet, heady reek of endlessly proliferating biomass, clacking and jostling. A knock on the door. Time slows to the wind-smoothed peak of a single heartbeat. Remember your breath. Remember your feet on the ground, your skirt bunched at your knees, your hair in its tight summertime bun, the music that waits outside the gray door you will touch as little as possible. Remember to wipe. Release yourself to joy. Outside, something shifts. The world glows blue. You leak everything from everywhere. Thanks. Thanks for the silent clapping. Silent thanks for the silent clapping. Okay, for the third poem, I figured I should read a TV poem since, as Chris mentioned in his generous introduction, TV is definitely a major theme in the book, a theme, an image pattern, a symbol, a metaphor. And that's also why on the cover there's this beautiful TV. It's so funny. I was actually planning on reading the poem Chris quoted from Get Away From Me Television, which for a very short while was a working title of this book, actually. But then at the last minute, I decided to change it to this poem. So at least we got a small taste of it from Chris. So this poem is called Spoilers. Spoilers. We avoid spoilers like we avoid Lake Ontario, best before dates, the evening news. Spoilers are the hottest blaspheme of the day. Spoilers are us at our best, worst selves. Don't spoil this for me, the 21st century says to the 24th. I'm still 3 seasons behind. As if it isn't obvious that the alien planet ends up being a simulation, that the president is a robot, that our favorite breakfast smoothie is poisoning the planet one guava at a time. Is it really the future we are afraid of spoiling? Who betrays whom and who kills what and who fucks where? Or is it something else? Something going rotten in the back of the universe's refrigerator? Just as correspondence chess games, each move predicated on the lunch breaks of mail carriers, becomes a game played online with someone in Dubai over a 3-minute BlackBerry Danish. Narrative time collapses into the spondee of play all, the sugary crunch of binge. This means something, you write in your viewing journal, but what? We look away. We watch 300 episodes of Who Wants to Be a Parking Lot Attendant. We distract ourselves from the difficult writer's room slog that's surely ahead of us. To craft a series ending that is thematically consistent, that is narratively fresh, that is just, that closes our solipsistic dream time with the sweetest possible decomposition. Thank you. Next, I'm going to read, at the back of the book, there's a section of poems that are sort of more traditionally lyrical in form. They're not as prose poemy and satirical, I guess you could say. So I'm going to read one of those now. I'll dedicate this one to my parents who are somewhere out there in the digital realm. It's called Côte St. Luc Road. Looking out the window late Friday night, the 9th floor apartment, a watchtower on the border between downtown and the suburbs, wondering about the cars going by. Suburban teenage Jews, perhaps, like I once was, driving home from the city, the corner of St. Catherine and St. Laurent carpeted with thousands of glinting watch batteries. Or have I fallen through the cracks of this weird night, 3 a.m. and unable to sleep, the city churning below me. And I'm watching my mother's car return from my father's small apartment on University, chili on the stove, a music stand, clarinet reeds sprinkled around the room like maple keys. They fell in love at the symphony, hands grasped in a tumult of horns, icy sidewalks. Or it's my father himself, taxiing home from Friday night dinner at my mother's family duplex, not far from where I stand now, a meal to mark the end of the week. There goes my uncle, then 18, blasted on 71 pot and in love again. The Beatles on the radio, so full of the world, my grandmother's basement was never going to contain him. The cities of Montreal and New York, where my parents hail from, are a pretty important geography in the book as well. But you'll have to buy or read a copy to find out how. So I'm going to read one more poem. Thanks a lot for coming and attending. For anyone who's in Toronto, I'm sort of doing a small, I guess, official-ish launch of the book on April 30th at Dufferin Grove Park at the South Fire Pit at 4 p.m. So if you feel like stopping by, feel free to. There's details for that on my website. So this last poem I'm going to read is called Cousinage, a Meet Cute. And it, throughout the poem, the concept of cousins sort of comes up again and again, but this is where it's sort of most focused. And the book basically presents the idea of cousins as an idea that could connect all living things, basically, in harmony. And this poem goes out to Myra. Cousinage, a meet cute. We first met at the airport. You were arriving, I was departing. Well, no, that's not true. We met at the docks. You had a snow globe of the shtetl on your back. I had a journal of poetry written in Yiddish, Judeo-Arabic, Ladino, biblical and military Hebrew, all in my worst Rashi script. Okay, that's not exactly how it happened. We met at a family reunion, did the math, discovered we were 18th cousins, 4th or 5th removed. We threw exactness to the wind, joked that at least we weren't 17th cousins, fell in love over Montreal cheese bagels and obscure rock and roll. Fine, you got me. That's a lie. The truth. We met in the Mech parking lot. We met outside the walls of Jericho, ready to defect. We met outside the cave, you sapien, I Neanderthal. Your brother had just killed my parents. We ate spaghetti and made up stories about the stars. We met behind the shopping mall's loading dock, our forest selves slick with horror. We met at the dawn of the Upper Silurian. You were a fresh-jawed fish. I was a giant scorpion, all elbows. We met on the shore. You still tasted of salt, slick and briny, were still wobbly on new legs. I was the biggest tree you've ever seen, had come out of the bath a few eons early to get dinner ready. We met at a deep sea vent some 4 billion summers ago, first cousins at last, finally ready to subdivide. From there, things got difficult, if you know what I mean. Some arms of the family just have a better sense of life's dining room table. The farther out along the endless river delta we go, the less likely our encounter. Yet everywhere we look, the spark from that first meeting, the mitochondria slipping into the soft-walled eukaryote, the smashing of glass, the groaning of the mantle, the asteroid and the oven, the pipeline and the smokestack, the iceberg and the volcano, a handmade guitar named the 6th extinction, the web in the high corner above our bed as we tell for the trillionth and final time the story of our love. I guess I ended up ending with with a love poem too, so to speak. So thanks everybody for coming. It's been a real blast. So now I'll hand it off to our final reader, Sanna. Thanks again.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks so much for that beautiful reading. I'm really excited to read your book now. And thank you to Nduka, also to ARC, to Octopus, just to everybody who is here for sticking around to the end. And yeah, I'm going to read a few poems for you from this book, which is called My Grief to the Sun, which is my first book. Yeah. Okay. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Today and Every Day Without You, and it begins with an epigraph from Alexander Ristovic, which is also the epigraph of the book The Trees by Heather Crystal, which I would highly recommend. It is a deeply beloved book to me. And the quote goes, "I don't care about the flowers, which I merely invented to give myself another reason to address you. Today and every day without you is long and sharp, tastes like milk and salt. A teacup where you sat, like so many trees, is now dry. We drink like tired fossils from the rock of our want, from the dregs of green and pink flowers hungry for the sun, like the roses in the garden, or the dream I had where you became the sky, where I met you in the unhurried blue of an afternoon daisy. Who stands to greet me? The sun? The breeze? Sliding down the letter H until I am home, waiting for your call. My mother, watching the light, sits still in the garden, bouncing continually through our hands the marble of the door, bright bronze and broken. Oh, hungry flowers, I am trying to show you how quiet the slope of my desire sits on the hillside, endless, buried. There you are in every beautiful thing, wearing the light. Again, I am watching the trees. Again, the sky is calling for quiet. The morning, like everyone's eyes, the door shut tight, only the daisies unfurling, watching as I leave. And then I think I will read this poem, which is called Between Spring Equinox and Summer Solstice Tonight. And it's after Emily Jungmin Yoon's poem, Between Autumn Equinox and Winter Solstice Today, which is a beautiful poem. That's my mom. So I'll just read this. Between spring equinox and summer solstice tonight. I read a Shahid poem with the line, the world is full of paper, and I am writing. Tonight I have been. Tonight I have enough paper for 3 letters and no ink. I think about the word bahar in Urdu. It means heavy. It means outside. It means to carry, to pride. Tonight we carry paper. Tonight we stack the hours word by word. The full face of the moon as open as the page. Someone says Ishmael, and your words, your books whisper with light. My wrist as loose as the door. My wrist the canon of a song. Bahar, I write. It's spring. We sleep. It's warm outside. Now I'm very aware of my family, who I'm visiting these days for the last 10 days of Ramadan and to spend Eid together. So I think I will read this poem, which is about them, which is called, I Remember an Incident Where My Mother Begs Me. I remember an incident where my mother begs me not to turn out like my siblings. And there was a time none of them spoke English, and I didn't realize that until one day I turned to Papa and asked what language echoed inside his head. There was a chicken factory my mother and father both worked at by the lake, and I only asked about it when I started working at the burger shop down the street. My father tells me how he would work his business in the mornings and go to the factory noon to midnight. He left when the business picked up, but this was where we had education and opportunity, so they spent their youth apart. My mother and father, they spent 13 years apart, 2 months here, 3 months there. When I was 3, I pushed my father out of bed and asked him who he was. Now I'm 23 and they ask me who I am. Try to understand the ideas that have grown inside my head, ideas that don't translate well, but I'm young and foolish, so I think I'm the only one living between languages. I don't remember the time we had to live in a storage unit, or when my sister's Halloween costume was made out of a garbage bag, and sometimes when you realize all your parents have lived through, You have nowhere to look, but that one time my mother left the house, overwhelmed and alone, fighting with 2 teenagers, took a walk by the lake and didn't come home until it was past dark. I waited by the door until she came back. I burst into an anger not meant for the body of a 6-year-old. I held her in my small arms as she begged me not to turn out like them. Like them. Like who? I asked, but I couldn't tell if it was my siblings or something else. And it was something else because weeks later I found a crumpled up church flyer in her coat pocket. See, 9/11 had just happened, and our sweet Canadian church-going neighbors were handing out flyers asking to evict every Muslim in the neighborhood. And my mother had just fought with her changing children and finished a shift at that horrible chicken factory when they asked her to go back, go home, go back to where you came from. And I imagine she didn't have the words in any language for the longing in her chest. That one is always sadder than I remember it. I don't know why I think it's not sad. It's very sad. I don't know. Anyway, I think I will read a couple out of the second section of the book, which is a very long erasure poem about anthropomorphism in Islam. So like, how does God manifest? What is God's hand? Like in Islam, basically, God is only really described as like a beam of light. Like God doesn't have a form, maybe. It's very transcendental. But then there are instances through language that through the Quran that you understand that God has a hand, or God has an eye, or God has a mouth, sort of. It's very in between. So these the essay that was erased to make these poems sort of deals with that question of what does that mean if God is the beam of light with a hand. Start talking about God's form then. God visited the prophet at night in his most beautiful form. He put his hand between the prophet's shoulder blades. A coolness he fell through. The other side was neither heaven nor hell. This gesture was a gift. A seed is a kind of stone. Belief is touch. This is the only theological proof. But how does God look in his most beautiful form? Some say he has exuberant hair like 1,000 wings. Everyone agrees he has no beard. Some call him the oldest day. This is an awareness of time. If you gather God from the length of your life, you're lucky if you can put together one day. Theologians are weavers. On the rock, there are 4 letters, hapax legomenon. Any assertion of meaning is strange and striking. You ask, what does a word really mean in the Quran, when you should ask, what increases our bewilderment? There is no answer for how the word was first understood. We only have sounds left over and a memory in the air around them. How am I doing for time? I think maybe I will just, in the theme of tonight, read a love poem and end off there. And thank you all again so much for listening and for being here. The very slow steps towards you are not what my feet do. There are moments here where I remember what your hands look like when you hold them out to me as we laugh, and how your eyes crease like my palms. Your eyes crease like my palms, and when I laugh, I can taste blood in my cheeks. What I am saying is, we are speaking. What I'm trying to say is, I speak full of laughter around you, You make my heart feel louder. You make my full, laughing heart feel louder. Louder is under my throat or under my tongue. You are both, soft to speak, even softer to swallow. I have had a hard time before swallowing things. Now I am singing to the swallows resting under my chest. You make me feel like there is singing. They are singing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanna. And thank you again to Aaron and to Nduka. This was a really lovely evening that just happened to have every poet ending their set with a love poem. How wonderful. We said that this event would be wrapping up at 8 o'clock, and we're right on time. I don't know if the readers have any final words or things they want to share with each other or share with the group. They can interrupt me if they do, but I'll just say some final words then. Another thank you to everyone for coming out, for listening, for putting in kind words in the chat, for lending your ears to these wonderful poets. Thank you again to Greg and Octopus Books. If you're in Ottawa, highly recommend going to Octopus Books. They're in the Glebe on 3rd Avenue, 116 3rd Avenue. I had to Google that so I didn't get it wrong. Thanks. If you want to know more about ARC Poetry Magazine, you can find us at arcpoetry.ca. If you haven't followed us on Twitter, we have 9,999 followers. So you could be the 10,000th follower of ARC Poetry Magazine on Twitter. But I just really appreciate everyone coming out and being so kind and attentive this evening.